After the success of SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, Nickelodeon once again partnered with Heavy Iron Studios to create the next SpongeBob game, which would be a tie-in to the upcoming film, the SpongeBob SquarePants Movie. Let's briefly talk about that. I used to watch this movie constantly. I've seen it so many times that I can practically recite the entire thing word for word. It was my favorite movie as a kid, and upon rewatching it, I have to say, it's just as awesome as I remember. It takes the best aspects of the first 3 seasons of SpongeBob and combines them with awe-inspiring animation and an extended runtime to create an excellent film that I still find myself watching, enjoying, and laughing at to this day. The film released on November 14th, 2004, and the game was released just a couple weeks earlier, in late October, just like the last game. As a follow-up developed by the same studio, the SpongeBob SquarePants Movie Game shares a lot of similarities with Battle for Bikini Bottom, but did it expand upon what it borrowed and create an even better game, or did it not quite live up to its predecessor? Well, upon replaying the game for this video and trying to figure this one out, I've come to the conclusion that the SpongeBob SquarePants Movie Game is just as good as SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. Not better, nor worse. If you haven't seen my Battle for Bikini Bottom video yet, I do recommend you watch it before watching this, for that game will be heavily referred to in this video. Before we get too in depth, it's critical to understand that SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom is a game based on the SpongeBob television series, while the SpongeBob movie game is a tie-in to the SpongeBob movie film, and though the film was based on the series, the game wasn't. It's vital to understand that before we move forward, so with that cleared up, I can begin my argument. So, the plot's identical to that of the film, which is great. What's not great is how it's presented to the player. You see, there's 2 different styles for Bikini Bottom and the movie game represent the golden age of SpongeBob, and with only 2 of the 3 covered, they're neat games, but in the early phases of making this video, life happened. My free time began to vanish, and I just couldn't seem to stay motivated to create anything. And after saying I was going to make a series of videos about SpongeBob games, I felt creatively trapped by a restraint I had created for myself. It was all in my head, no one was holding me to it, just myself. But I felt stuck, so I stopped. Now this isn't to say I don't like SpongeBob anymore, it's still one of my favorite shows ever, but limiting myself to consuming and talking about only SpongeBob-based media was not a good thing for me. But it's been a long time, and life took a pause recently, so I try to make the best of it by finishing what I started and posting this. With this video done, the future of this channel is whatever I feel like making it. Whatever I care to talk about and share is what I'll be posting from here on out. It'll be quite varied, but I don't really care. Thanks for listening to what I have to say. Sorry that went on for a bit. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you want to see more, consider subscribing. Have an awesome day, guys. Stay well.